Hello and welcome back to the I'm Glad You're Here podcast. I'm your host, Greg Sharp. Today's episode is Jason Fylan-Mares. Jason is just one of my closest and dearest friends in comedy and out of comedy. I think even if I wasn't doing stand-up, Jason and I would still be like brothers from another mother. I really love spending time with Jason. He is just, he's one of my confidants in life. He is just somebody I can always go to when I need a little piece of advice or a little bit of encouragement. He's just a beautiful human being. I can't wait for you to meet him. He and I got to spend some time up together at the Traverse City Comedy Fest. That's where we recorded this episode in the lobby of the Hotel Indigo, Traverse City. So special thanks go out to all of them for making this possible. I really can't wait for you to get into this episode, so I'm going to leave this pretty sweet and short. I really love all of the different directions we take in this conversation. We spend a little bit of time on mental health and also a lot of time on the ins and outs of comedy and the nuts and bolts of what make us tick as comedians. So I really can't wait for you to get into this. So without further ado, here's Jason Fylan-Mares. We are here day 3 at the Traverse City Comedy Fest. I'm here with my very good friend Jason Fylan-Mares, and I'm glad you're here.
Thanks,
Jason.
brother. I'm glad to be here.
I'm really glad you're here.
Thank you.
The reason I do this podcast is it stems from these bracelets that I've been giving away since I've started comedy. I mean, I had merch at like my 4th or 5th open mic because of the reason
that's ballsy. I love that.
It's ballsy. But part of the reason I did it was so that I could tell fellow comedians, just regular people, that I'm glad they're here. Because part of the reason I do comedy is because of my own depression issues, and coming out of that, it was just, man, I just need to tell people I'm glad they're here. So what I'd like to do in this podcast is talk about people, I talk to you about how you got here, what you're doing here, where you're going.
Sure.
We're just here in the here and now, man. And that's all we can do. We're just living here. We're just living now. And a lot of things have brought us here.
Yes.
And we all have our own stories.
I appreciate that so much. I'm glad you're doing this. I always thought that mental health and comedy was such an obvious blend. We like to say in my organization, Doomsday Shelter Comedy for Mental Health, we always like to say that comedy isn't just the best medicine, it's the antidote to despair and a bridge to better things. I'll get to that in a second, but I just wanted to mention something you touched on. So August 1st of last year, I was going through a really bad bout of depression. And my depression is usually brought on by my severe clinical obsessive-compulsive disorder, which I think most people, when they think of it, they think of like the TV character Monk, washing your hands a bunch of times, and I've done that. But mine is a lot more crippling. Essentially, if I get some type of idea in my head, and it can be the most ridiculous, it usually deals with like people that I love, their health, or kind of monitoring what's wrong with them. I also have this really scary habit of, and this is pretty common in OCD, giving human qualities to unliving things. So like if I throw something away, sometimes I'll be worried about its feelings, and that's really weird to some people. But in particular, this was in August. I wasn't feeling very well. I had a comedy show in Pentwater, Michigan with my buddy Derek Richards, who I'd been wanting to work with for a long time, and I wasn't feeling up to it. And we did the show, and it was great. Before I went on, Amanda told me that it had been a very long time since I'd performed feeling that depressed, and she told me that I just had to somehow find the energy, and I did. The show was fine. Afterwards, we got ice cream, and then we were walking back to our car, and right there in the middle of between a little field between two buildings, it was like the monolith scene from 2001. Gigantic sign said "Be Here Now," which is also the title of my favorite Oasis record, which I always find to be very uplifting. And it was just so weird. It just didn't seem like it belonged there. Yeah. I don't think it was like divine or anything. It was just a coincidence, but it was bizarre. And now I took a picture of that, and I have it on my phone, and I look at it every time before I go up on stage. And just to like, and that's actually what helped me start moving past some of this. I always get pulled back into it, as you know, and you're never really out of it. But the idea to live in the moment is so important. I recently did a presentation at Oakland University about my journey through depression, And I told them that, I told these students, be here now. And I said, experience the present in real time. Don't preoccupy yourself with a moment before, a moment after. And I think once you start doing that, that can become a really good habit and life becomes much more enjoyable. It's those moments when I don't have my mind occupied and I start thinking about what's 10 years from now going to look like, what's 20, but it's so much better to be here and worry about those things than it is to not be here. And I think all the people that love us would agree with that.
No, I think so too. And for me, I don't know if my depression, it stems from not being able to let go of those feelings in the past.
Yes.
That I cling to those like I need them for some reason. When they're just lessons. They're just
and these were formed when you were a child, right? At the formative years.
All along, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's strange. Yeah, it's strange how I think about this all the time with specific things that I do, and I can kind of pinpoint the moment where that became a learned behavior. The furthest back I can remember obsessive compulsive disorder was probably 4 years old. I had a toy Snoopy, and before I went to bed, I don't even remember exactly what I would say, but I had some bizarre ritual where I'd have to touch his nose like 50 times and like repeat this phrase. And I think my family at the time just didn't understand it. I know my sister teased me about it. She still does, which is totally fine. But it's interesting because I do believe in some way that OCD is pretty obviously a person's ambition and effort to exhibit control.
Oh yeah.
I think that's what it all comes from.
This is a world of chaos.
Yeah, and you want to reel it in.
Uh-huh.
So your depression, can you specifically, you don't have to name them, but do you know in your head moments where those seeds were planted, like specific incidents?
If I sat down and thought about them, and when I sit down and think about them, I can usually sort of pinpoint where certain feelings come from.
Yeah.
And I've sort of had to learn how to do that, like through certain exercises, just sort of like just think about it, just sort of like press on the bruise a little bit, sort of feel the feeling.
Yes.
And don't be afraid of the feeling.
Yes.
And for the most part, it's usually things like, oh, there was a moment in time where I felt like that mattered a lot.
Sure.
And I just couldn't let it go.
It's weird.
It is weird.
And I think that's exactly, and I don't know if you would specifically call it OCD, but that's how I feel a lot of times too, not being able to let things go. Or the problem with OCD is I always describe it like this. You can fight through it and work through it. If there is an actual OCD diagram, it's like obsession and then the compulsion, which you act out to relieve the obsession, and it does work temporarily, right. And then it just fills up. So I always think of it's like a cup, and you train yourself to empty the cup, and then it just fills back up. And it's actually a physical sensation that I get when I know my OCD is coming on. So yeah, it's really something you have to fight through.
Your brain's searching for dopamine any way it can find it.
Yeah, exactly.
And if that happens to be, just fixing the fringe on the rug on the floor,
yes,
then
it's so
that's
true.
What you do.
Yeah, because why do I want to suffer like this? I know this will bring relief. One thing that I used to do when I used to be as you know, a college professor for about 15 years. One thing I really struggled with, and I only told my therapist this at the time, because I didn't want anybody else around me to know. But like if I had a class, I ran from like 1 to 2:45, class would get out, everybody would leave, I turn the lights off, get my bag, but then like I look around the room, oh, there's a piece of string in the corner. That string's going to be lonely if I close this door. I better go get it. And this sometimes would go, if people walk by, they'd think there's a crazy person in there. But this would sometimes take me another 20 minutes to a half hour. Oh, somebody left a fringe from some notebook paper. Well, that has feelings. Yeah. It's a really interesting thing. And I think what it is, it's like amplified empathy. It's like you feel so empathetic towards people and animals that it then becomes empathy for, that bottle or that couch. It's like the idea of you use out a couch and then you put it by the road for the garbage to come. Those are very difficult moments for me.
Sure, yeah.
I find that extremely sad.
Now you've sort of, when you started talking about it, you said this might sound silly, and it might, but to somebody who's watching or listening right now, it might feel like home. And
Good. Yeah, I'm good. I'm
and
glad.
something that I really admire about what you do and your mission is
Thanks.
that you are the person who is willing to talk about the things that hurt and the things
Thank you.
that maybe we're not really free to talk about sometimes.
Exactly.
And why do you think that is? Why do you think
It's a great
mental
question.
health in particular? And I think we've come a long way over the last few years.
We have, yeah.
There's a lot of positive things that have been happening with mental health. But
We have.
why do you think it is that we're still so hard? It's still hard for us to talk about it.
It's a great question. And I will, before I answer it, I just want to say, too, that I think one thing that the pandemic did positive for us was that it did amplify some people's mental health issues, but it also amplified the spotlight to go on them. And I think that's where we started to make some progress. I believe, my personal belief on this is that the reason why there's still a stigma around it, I think because in the past, you can go back to like Salem witch trials. Those were probably mental health issues or some type of physical health issues. But if anybody acted in a way that was somehow disturbing to the audience of the general populace, there was a label, and we get into like shock therapy and really inhumane treatment of people with mental health problems. And I think that's the stigma. There's like a scariness to it.
Yeah.
That people feel burdened by.
And like, who wants to be associated with that, right? Like, if there's a stigma, it's like, well, I'm gonna do everything that I can to to convince myself that I'm not. That's not something that I don't have that affliction.
Exactly.
That's everybody else.
Yes.
It couldn't be me.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a really personal thing for me because,
sure.
I don't know. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, and depression. There was a long time where if you mentioned that, a dude had depression, I was like, oh, well, what's he really dealing with? That just seems like a cop-out or
that's a great one.
It's not a real manly thing to admit to.
It's not.
So part of my own coming to terms with my depression was, first of all, admitting that it could be possible. But I remember the time when my general practitioner doctor asked me if I thought I was depressed. I'm like, come on.
Right.
And she handed me a test, and I took the test, and man, I passed that test with flying colors.
I passed those tests. Yeah, those are fun. Straight
like,
A's.
have you ever thought about harming yourself? I got to that question. I'm like, uh-oh.
Right.
We might have to have a conversation.
Exactly.
And it was hard for me to come to terms with that.
Was it?
Even in my own brain, not to admit it to anybody else, just to admit it to myself.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And I think what's hard about that too is that mental health and depression can't be specifically quantified in a way like a cancer can be, but it can be just as deadly. And I don't think that's overselling it at all. We all suffer in different ways, but I do remember one of the places I received treatment at, and I know exactly what you're talking about, those tests. They do ask you two questions. One was, do you have any homicidal thoughts? And I can honestly sit here and tell you, not once in my life have I ever once thought about, like, killing somebody. Cannot fathom that. I was almost offended by the question. But then they ask you if you thought about hurting yourself. And then you're like, yeah, maybe sometimes. Then the follow-up question is what? Do you know?
Oh, I don't even remember.
Do you have specific plans?
Yeah.
Which I always thought it's funny how they word that.
Uh-huh.
It's like I'm drawing a diagram or like blueprints. But I understand what they're saying.
And people who've had those thoughts, and I'll admit I was one of those people.
Same.
I had the thoughts about, like, well, if I was to do it, what are the ways that you don't want to be? I don't want to be found in a way that's gonna traumatize somebody.
Same.
So, like, all of my thoughts were about, like, what's the cleanest way to do this? That's the real thought.
It's as normal as us sitting here right now, and it's horrifying to think of now, and it's good that we're horrified by it. But at the time, it wasn't. It was very businesslike. It was like, okay, it's just like I do everything else. I'm going to plan. I'm going to have steps. So that's absolutely terrifying too. But I remember one time one of the places I received treatment, we did like an entrance test, and I remember I was in a separate room with like the young college student who had just graduated, who was like the assistant, and I was doing the test. It was like a Scantron, and I don't remember exactly what the questions were that set off the bells and alarms, but I slid the test back, and like 5 minutes later, the actual practitioner comes busting through the door, and she's like, I've got people ready to take you to the hospital unless you have a better explanation for what these answers were. So they were very scared. And I looked at my answers, and there was nothing imminent. It was just like, yeah, I feel this way all the time.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like an emergency when it's all the time.
That's that should be. I think it could be a T-shirt or something. You and I could both sell.
We'll get a patch.
It's a patch. I was just
telling. Any room on that?
I was just telling Ryan Brown this. I said that I want to. He's like, "How do you going to put more?" I said, "Here's the thing, Ryan. I want to make it so that there's more patch than Gene. I want people to be like, what is that? He's just wearing a giant patch.
It's got to be heavy.
It feels like chainmail." That's what I was telling Ryan.
It's like a thunder shirt.
It is. It is. The thing is, and this is all honesty, Ryan was like, "We got some real serious stuff, like pentagrams," and I said, "Here's the thing. There's a lot of satanic stuff on here, but honestly, this is why. I mean, I love like bands like Slayer and all that. I've always listened to it, but I actually put these prominently in the middle. These sort of like what people would look at as like devil symbols. There's a very specific reason I put them on there, and that is to remind myself that sometimes it's okay to channel your dark side. It's not evil. In fact, I think of anything satanic, I think of it exactly the same way if somebody were wearing a Darth Vader patch. It's a fictional villain who you kind of sometimes root for, who's kind of a badass. So there's no religious or worship or black rituals or anything going on at the Fylan-Mares house. It's simply a reminder that, hey, sometimes you can't get out from under.
I'm so thrilled that you're bringing this up on your own. It's a beautiful thing to talk about. I really love it.
It is. It's just to remind myself, like, you're not always going to feel great. And for those times that you don't, it's okay to use it. Yeah. It's there. And I know I sometimes,
but even from a distance, looking at you from a distance, you are somebody there's a statement being made here somehow that people are going to want to know who you are and what all of this means.
I appreciate that.
And for you to just, I love this.
Thank you. I appreciate that. There was actually, I actually brought this up here specifically to wear to the Comedy Rumble, and then I didn't wear it because I thought, I got 90 seconds to do comedy. I don't want them to be distracted. I want to just do my jokes. But I have jokes about this. You actually gave me one of my best. Do you remember what the joke was?
Oh, which one are we talking about?
So you had a joke about the jacket because I was working on some jacket jokes. You're like, I got one. Oh. You said, Amanda loves this. These are my, so first of all, I come up and I say, yeah.
I think I do.
Yeah. So first of all, I come up and say, like, I'm sorry I was late. Hot Topic was having a sale on patches. I had a needle and thread in my car, and I Betsy Ross this thing in like 10 minutes. And then you said, go.
Oh, I don't know if I remember exactly what I said.
Try it.
No, it was something about Cub Scouts, wasn't it?
These are my merit badges for the Satan Scouts.
Okay. My merit badges for
hilarious,
the Satan Scouts.
and I still have yet to use it, but it's there. I'm going to use it. But
Well, no, you're talking about OCD while wearing a jacket, which is total chaos, which has to be. That's therapy. You're wearing therapy.
I am. It's. Not even therapy clothes. It is actual therapy.
Actual therapy.
Well, here's the funny thing about the background of this jacket was right at the beginning of COVID, I got it really, really badly, and I was in bed for the better part of 3.5 weeks. And I always admired the burnouts when I was in high school. Those dudes were so cool, but I was too afraid to be them. So they always had these awesome jackets, all these patches on it, and I thought, here's the thing. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that, but make it way more than they ever had on it. But I also think, too, you're right, it is chaos, but it's organized chaos because it's like I knew exactly where all the stuff was going to go. I was laying it out, and then we had my wife owns a fitness center called Pure Bar Grand Blanc, and we have a lovely young woman, Abby, who works there, who's a seamstress. And so it was Abby's burden to put this thing together for me. She did a great job. The funny thing was, this was actually, we didn't know Abby had finished it, and it was Christmas 2 years ago, and I'm at Amanda's parents' house, and I whip this thing open. There's just Satan all over it. I'm like, yay, Christmas! Happy birthday, Jesus! And it's just got all this stuff. But then on the back, though, and this is what Billy Reno told me, he's like, you look real intimidating with that jacket until I see the back. And I can show the viewers later, but So in the middle is a giant patch of the angel of death. I didn't know this looks cool. It just looked cool. But around it here, is there a way we can
No, you just spin
stand
around there. It'll probably pick you up.
Yeah, it's my cats.
Oh.
I have patches of all my
Your
cats. So I've been lucky. Two of my cats have passed on, but they're on there, and my 2 current cats are on there.
Oh, you got like Kobe. Man, you got a little
I
bit
got
of
Kobe.
everything.
I also have this. Is there a 42? There should be a football number, 42. I think it's down. Do you see it?
I don't see the 42.
It should be. Maybe it's on this side.
Maybe it's on that side. Oh, no. I don't.
It's here somewhere. But so that was 42 is for a young man that was killed in the Oxford High School
right, of
shooting.
course.
Yeah, Tate Muir, who played football for Oxford High School. And I always want to honor him. And then somewhere on here, there's an Oxford Wildcat. But yeah, so I started putting it together when I was sick, and then it took a couple years. But it's still not done. As I told my buddy Ryan, we're gonna keep working on it. I have a couple more in mind. But yeah, my cats are on the back because I always they're my stability, and they are, as we all know, like animals, pets tend to really lower stress in people. I know when I come home and I see my cat sprawled out on the couch, that relaxes me.
Yeah.
It just makes me feel good. I'm glad that they're happy. I'm glad that they're safe. The 2 cats that we have right now were abandoned, and somebody put them in a box and put them on someone's front step, which I think could actually be seen as an act of mercy and not an act of cruelty. But they were homeless, and they're with us now, and that makes me happy. It makes me happy to provide a home.
Again, it's all about anybody who looks at you from the outside may not know who you are. You're a softie. You're
I
a
am.
cat guy.
I am. Thank you.
You like cuddles.
I do. I love. Okay, so here's what you're gonna find out about me. I love when my cats sleep next to me. It's my favorite thing. My cat Daphne, my girl Daphne, she every night. I love it so much. I do. I sleep better when my girl Daphne's by my side.
I love to hear that.
She's
I
the
have
best.
2 and a dog, and
Yeah.
none of them are allowed to sleep with me, or none of them actually want to.
None of them have shown the initiative to
No,
be interested in that.
sleep alone.
Yeah.
I do want to get into, though, the connection, because there's obviously, you mentioned it earlier, there's an obvious connection between mental health and comedy.
Oh.
And it may not be obvious to some,
Yeah.
but I think to you and I, it's absolutely clear. In fact, the reason why I'm glad you're here, is it all stems from Robin Williams.
Yeah.
When it just got me thinking about what would, not necessarily him, but if I had known somebody who was to take their own life, what would I have wanted the last thing I said to them to be?
Wow.
And, I racked my brain for a little bit. I don't know. How do you tell somebody who's in total despair that not all hope is lost? I don't know if I have the words to tell them that.
Yeah.
But I do know that I would have wanted them to know that I wish they were still here. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm taking every opportunity that I have to tell people that I'm glad they're here in the here and now.
I was going to say it's a very present tense
It's a present
sentence.
tense.
Yeah.
And the words are chosen very specifically. I'm glad that you're here.
Right.
We're all here together, but it's a personal one-on-one thing.
I love that.
Yeah.
I've always loved that. It's such a powerful statement, and you're right. It feels like you'd want to say more, but I think that statement alone, I'm glad you. So that's 4 words, 4 syllables. Hey, buddy, is so fitting and so perfect, because I think sometimes minimalism is the way to go.
Well, it's the economy of words.
The economy of words, exactly.
It's a comedy
Exactly.
concept as it is.
And I know something. I was really excited when I saw. I think it was your first weekend working at Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle. Was it Michael Malone?
It was, yeah.
And I didn't know too much about him.
Nor did I.
And I have his book, and you were kind enough to introduce me to him, and he was very nice. But in watching his set, first of all, I just remember this. I remember you, but there was the night I went, the castle was full because there was some big group that had bought all the tickets.
That's right, yes.
And you're coming out with your Hitler jokes. I'm like, look at this guy. Can we swear on this? Or no?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I'm like, this fucking guy's just. And I remember sitting there going, he's not doing that. And I'm like, you know what, Greg? Just put your foot on the gas and do it. And it did well.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary. You had a house full of old people that are really laughing at the Hitler jokes.
Well,
You
I
kind of
figure
wonder,
if you
are they?
open with a Hitler joke,
Right.
It's like everything after that is going to be clear sailing.
Clear sailing.
It's like, okay, I didn't know what to expect when he started with the Hitler stuff.
Hey, buddy. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I really love doing this podcast in the middle of the lobby where there's so many interactions with people.
I love
walking
it.
by.
I love it.
It's like once I get into the studio, and this is obviously like one of the first few episodes that I'm doing.
Yeah.
I have the studio at home waiting for me to keep this going.
Yeah.
And I'm going to miss it. I'm going to miss the...
This is such a great idea. I know.
I'm going to bring this wherever I go.
And you have a, like, how did this corner, like, it's like Greg Sharp corner. Like, how did this?
I just claimed it.
I'm sure, yeah.
It was the chairs. I really love the chairs.
Yeah.
I'm going to contact the hotel after.
Oh, these are nice.
I need to know where they got them or if I could just
like-
buy them directly.
It has a very Pier 1 vibe. You remember
does.
Pier 1?
They're not super comfortable, but you don't necessarily want to be too comfortable on a podcast. Otherwise, you're like 3 hours in and
You
like,
get lazy and you're sloppy.
yeah. And then we're talking about like psilocybin and we might actually get into that.
Yeah, but real quick, so you come out firing with your Hitler jokes, and I'm like, this is going to be a banner night. And then Michael Malone comes out, and I was so impressed by how he talked about mental health, but it wasn't preachy, and it was still hilarious. And of course, we know Gary Gulman is with, when I watched The Great Depression, it's brilliant, obviously, but to be truthful, I was depressed after watching it because it was so. It was like he spoke through me, or I spoke, whatever.
Yeah.
It was so perfectly done. I could relate to all when he lists all those medications.
Yeah.
I did 30 meds in 1 year, and nothing would click. The only thing it did was make me pissed and gain weight, and I didn't want any of that. And then Michael Malone, Gary Gulman, and then so. Do you have, and I don't know, I haven't seen you do probably longer than maybe 20, which is strange at this point. Do you have a lot of depression jokes?
I really don't. And I think I've talked about this a couple of times this weekend because still all my jokes are mostly short form, one-line
They
jokes,
are.
which is my natural inclination to write those types of things.
Right.
But I am moving towards a more of like I'm ready to tell my story on stage.
Sure.
And I'm growing as a comic.
Yeah.
And I'm not there yet. I'm 5 years in.
Sure.
I'm developing the skills of writing jokes.
Yeah.
And when I feel like those are ready to go, I don't want to tell my story until it's ready.
Yeah.
But it's not like I'm afraid to talk about depression because I do. I mention. Obviously, I give
You
out my
do
bracelets.
mention it, like, right in the middle of your
I give out
set.
my bracelets at every show.
Yeah.
So I mention it as often as I can. Come see me after the show. I'll give you a bracelet, and this is why I do it. But there's no jokes attached to that. I just take a 30-second chunk in
Right.
the middle of whatever I do.
Yeah, there's no punchline. It's just an endorsement.
And, when I find the way to make the jokes, they're there. There's ways to talk about depression that are hysterically funny.
Oh, for
Just
sure.
like anything else.
For sure.
But it's just not something I've done yet.
So, I believe it was 2 years ago, I took Bill Bouchard's 101 class for the second time. I just felt like I needed a refresher. And I told him, I've been working on the set about my depression. And he goes, let's hear him. So I went up and I did it. I only have about 5 jokes, but the premise is that, and you probably relate to this, the premise is that the worst part of depression isn't the sadness. It's when you feel good for a day and then sign up for to do a bunch of shit you don't want to do later. So the idea is that, like, neighborhood game night, which is something I would never do.
I've heard you do this.
Yeah, okay. I've only done it a couple of times.
I relate to that
Sure.
incredibly. And maybe this podcast is one example of that.
Sure,
where,
yeah.
Like, man,
Yeah.
I felt really great for the last couple of months.
Yeah.
Where, like, it's time to start moving again and
Get those
working out
gears moving.
muscles and
Yeah.
start having conversations with
For sure.
actual humans.
For sure.
But I relate to that entirely.
It's great.
So
I'm
like,
glad.
Man, I feel good today. Let's go buy a kayak
Or a douche canoe.
or a douche canoe.
But that's exactly what I'm saying. So when I started doing them, I did them in class, and Bill said those are going to work. And I said I'm kind of a puss to do them, and I said I don't want to bring the party down. So these jokes do have a couple dark moments, and sometimes I leave them in, sometimes I don't, because then Amanda, like, the idea is that Amanda then lists the different games we could play, and first she says Candyland, and I say I can't play Candyland. I'm already depressed. I don't need diabetes too. So then we go to Operation, and this is where I lose people. I say, like, I can't play Operation. The only person a depressed person should be cutting is themselves. And then that's they get, and then they the one that they really get mad at, though, is say Hungry Hungry Hippos. And I said it's the 80s game that taught a generation of school kids that eating disorder is just a fun after-school activity with 3 of your friends. But see that they kind of go with that. But then I say, which version is it? The bulimia challenge where the hippos eat all the food and spit it back out, or the anorexia challenge where they just stare at the food and wonder why nobody asked them to prom this year. And that one doesn't always hit very well. But then I end it by saying a sad person's perfect day for me is watching a doubleheader of Old Yeller and Marley and Me. While my wife takes his Christmas decorations down and all this. But I end it with saying, they say when God closes a door, he opens a window. That's just because it's easy to jump from a window. God just wants what's best for you. And I love doing it, but that's when they're like, no. But what's really cool is in the middle of all the game show, it's never once bombed. It's never killed. But what I always see, every time, people looking at each other like, oh, that's you. And I love that. Yeah. And at that point, I'm trying to, and it sounds kind of savior-like or cheesy, but I am really trying to be a spokesperson for them. It's like, it's okay. It's okay to laugh.
I think it does get back to what I mentioned earlier, which is I didn't know I was depressed when I was mostly depressed.
Right.
For most of that time because I wasn't ready to admit that that's what depression was.
Right.
But I could relate to something like that.
Right.
Being like, oh, is that depression?
That's it, yeah.
That might be me. And if somebody needs that little nudge
yeah.
to maybe go get the help that they need.
Exactly.
I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody come up after a show and thank me for just mentioning it.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people out there who just need to hear that it's okay.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that it's, okay, but it's okay. Or it will be okay.
Yeah. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. Well, there is something wrong with you, but it's something that you want to.
And there's something that can be fixed.
It became awareness. I think the biggest takeaway I would say for all my times of being that depressed is that, and I think you can relate to this, that when you feel that way, you honestly think you'll never feel good again. But then you feel good, you're like, man, who was that guy? Or girl, whoever it is. So that's the thing. I always really, really hard to have perspective when you're in the middle of it. And when I'm really depressed, I say stupid things, not like suicidal things, but like, I'm just going to quit comedy. Man will be like, why? Just because. Because I know quitting it will make me more miserable, so why not?
Isn't that the way?
Yeah, if we're going to feel bad, let's take the whole house down with us.
Well, there are times when I don't think I've ever had the feeling, it's kind of a trope now among comedians. It's like, oh, are you going to quit today? Are you quitting again?
Right.
Because you hear it often. It's like, I'm stepping away. I'm not going to do comedy anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, didn't you say that last year? And
well,
so
people like to announce it on social
like
media, and so people will tell them not to.
Like, oh, no, you're still relevant.
Oh, you. If I were to ever quit, I would. I will never will. But if I ever did, I just would. No one would ever know.
Right. But there are times though where it's like, I wish I didn't have a show tonight. I would give anything to stay in bed tonight.
I've had a few of those.
And for me, having something on the schedule a comedy show on the schedule is more important to me.
Oh.
That'll get me out of bed. That'll get me out of the house. That'll get me showered and dressed.
I couldn't agree more. Just seeing it on the calendar.
There's not many other things that do.
That's perfect.
Yeah. Especially when I'm feeling like when it's a really crummy day.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't always that way. When I started, I'm sure a lot of people might be able to relate to this. I love canceling plans. I love the feeling of having a plan and being like, I'm not going to do that. I'm making the choice for myself that I'm not going to do that.
Well, it is. It's hilarious that you said that, but it's also it's taking power back.
It is.
And I hate canceling on people. I do. I hate it.
I hate that.
But sometimes.
but also, I kind of like it.
I know there is some satisfaction in saying, you know what, it's some me time.
I'm gonna go,
your shit
pour
that
some lavender into the bathtub.
That's what Amanda would do. Read a romance novel. But yeah, it's funny. There is something liberating about it. It's like, you know that shit I said I was gonna do for you. I don't think I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
So the less high stakes, the better. Obviously. But
Yes.
now that I see comedy as something that is really crucial to my being,
Yeah.
it's as part of me as anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how bad I'm feeling. I'm going to go on stage that night. And they might see a little bit of it on stage.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to really love that person.
Yeah.
I really love curmudgeon Greg who gets on stage. And it's just, I really could.
I've seen him once or twice.
I really could care less what any of you think of any of this.
We know one person that cared about what you said. We can talk about that.
We do.
We can talk about that. I just wanted to say real quick. I don't know. I forgot.
He's referencing. Really, it's been the only time when I've had anybody come up to me after a show.
This shit is so funny. I
tell me
cry
that they did not enjoy me. It's I very rarely as comedians does anybody tell anybody like, look, I didn't like you. You will very often hear, hey, good stuff, or my personal favorite, which is when you're with another comedian and they tell them you were my favorite one while you're standing right next to them. And then they turn to you and it's like, oh, you were good too. That's my personal favorite.
Ray Romano had a hilarious bit about. I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No, but that's about as as negative as anybody ever gets in the lobby after a show.
No, for sure, yeah. And I want you to tell the story, but real quick, Ray Romano had this so funny about doing a performing on a cruise ship, and he's like, I bomb, then I got the guy that was booing me, heck, I got to pass him in the salad bar. That's hilarious, just looking across. So what happened?
We do have to live together in this cruise ship.
We
but
do.
That's all this is.
Yeah.
It's one big cruise ship.
Exactly. It's what it is. So that was. My dad was actually wondering when you were coming back. So what's that fella that lady got mad at? Well, that's my buddy Greg. So you should have him back. Well, he's coming, Dad.
I'm coming back. It's only in a couple of days.
It's
actually.
a couple weeks. Yeah.
The day before my birthday.
Nice.
So,
we'll celebrate.
So, but yeah, it's literally the only time that anybody's ever come up to me and said, "Look, I was offended by something you said up there," and it wasn't even after the show. It was during the show.
I mean, that must have been a high priority event.
I was standing in the back of the room after having done my set. I did my, I think it was like a 15 or 20 minute set, and I was standing in the back of the bar there. And man, everything about your show is always so positive.
Thank you.
You mentioned your everything you do for mental health. It's obvious that it's part of everything that you do. So everybody should have an understanding in that room that, look, we're just here trying to make people giggle. There's no malice meant by anything that any of us are saying.
None.
And I'm not even going to get into the specifics
That's okay.
of it.
That's okay.
It's really not worth it. But, she didn't like that I had said something up there that personally offended her on behalf of somebody else, and which is my... You know.
We talked about this. I don't love that at all.
I don't love that at all.
No.
I understand your empathy when you hear that somebody's feelings might be hurt.
Right.
But to be offended on behalf of somebody who might not even be offended.
Right. I could say something right now, but I'm not.
It annoys me.
Yeah.
Like, don't talk about white knighting.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's trying to make yourself feel better.
I feel like it's the virtue signaling version of like a man taking off his jacket and throwing it in a mud puddle so a woman can walk over it. I thought that was always such a pussy move. Who the fuck do you ruin your jacket for?
She's still stepping in the puddle. I don't know what your jacket's doing. What's your jacket made of?
That members only thing it's probably very expensive. You
That's
just ruined
an old
it.
Trope. That trope
So
way
old.
predates Gore-Tex.
Oh, yeah. I always remember like, what are you, a puss? What are you doing?
What are we doing here?
Did the woman want you to do? That's the thing.
Walk around the puddle.
If puddle's this big. And could we maybe just ask the woman if she wants that shit? Maybe she doesn't want the virtue signaling.
Maybe she wanted to splash in that puddle.
You
took that away from her.
Exactly.
So, anyways,
yeah.
It was one of those moments though that did make me think. All right, well, was I in the wrong? Is there anything I could have done?
Yeah.
Ultimately, I've come to the conclusion that no, I've continued to do the joke exactly as written. But like I felt instantly bad for what I had done to your show.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like I never want to harm the show or harm the booker in any way.
No, I appreciate that. We nobody thought that. In fact, Amanda and I both said like, I'm so glad he didn't apologize. And I thought
that was what she was asking for, an apology, and she was asking me to promise that I'd never do it again.
Oh, did she say that?
Yeah.
That's so weird. Yeah, and you can check in on me to make sure I'm not. What a weirdo. She said after that show, this would Amanda handled it all. She's better at it.
Yeah, I remember. You said Amanda was handling it beyond the door.
Oh, everybody could see
which
it.
was right behind the stage.
And there's a window.
There's a window.
Now they have a drape over there. It's called the Amanda drape because Amanda's just talking to this lady and everybody could see it. So poor Steve Sabo's up there ripping it up. And they're like, oh, look at Amanda's talking to some crazy lady. But the thing that came out of that conversation.
Oh, George is really giving it to T-Bone. That's exactly what it was.
It was. The thing that made me mad that Amanda, she told me everything she said. The one thing that she said that did make me mad, that would have made me mad, is she said, I'm going to ruin you.
Yeah.
And I thought.
Well, and that sort of gets down to the psychology of it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, and I thought 3 months ago, we did a 5-hour show for the victims of the Oxford High School shooting. So, like, how fucking dare you come here and tell me you're going to ruin me? And
it's so narrow-minded.
It's so sad. But it's
Yeah.
funny, too. And we've talked about this before, but, like, how self-centered do you have to be? Way to make it about you, lady. Like, seriously.
It wasn't even about her.
I wonder, too, if she thought, you know what? These people on stage are pretty cool. I'm not nearly as cool. Let me get in on this without having to stand behind the mic.
I think what tickled me the most about it is because we're talking about a joke that is not my most offensive joke.
No,
by
it's
any stretch of
my
the
dad's favorite.
It's your dad's favorite?
Yeah.
It wasn't even the most offensive joke that I told that night. It wasn't even the most pointed joke I made about any specific kind of person.
Oh,
that
yeah,
night.
right.
I was...
But the likelihood of there being one of the other kind... extremely low.
Extremely low.
Even lower than the one that you got in trouble
Right,
for.
So I still... there's a joke I do about people with vestigial tails, which is my favorite thing. Okay, when you talk about groups who are... There's very few people with tails.
Yeah.
And I love that there are people with tails.
Sure.
I absolutely love
All
it.
God's creatures.
All God's creatures. But how many comedians are doing jokes about people with tails? I don't know any others.
You may have started a trend.
Cornered the market on the tails.
I think that joke's so funny. Knocking drinks.
Yeah, they knocked drinks. Yeah, we met them at the hotel bar. Kept knocking my drink off my table. So.
That actually made me think, too, like, can you control that thing like a dog can?
Oh, yeah, I know.
But also a dog sometimes is like, I have a tail. My cat sometimes does. He's like, what the fuck is this thing?
That's why they...
Yeah.
they're
Or
always
they
looking
chase
back.
it. I'm like,
Yeah.
stop. You're going to hurt yourself.
No, I do wonder that. Because I often ask when I do that joke, hey, are there any here? And nobody ever says yes.
What if one day, what about
Can't
it?
wait. Oh, my God.
Well,
It's
do you
gonna be
have
the
it
best day of my life.
prepped
We're
and
gonna-
ready?
Oh, yeah. No, I don't know what I'm going to say, but we're definitely taking pictures after.
Of your backs?
Yeah, we're just backed up. We're having drinks.
and they're gonna be on the floor. 'Cause that's hilarious. That was
Well, I think it, though, like, because obviously we're doing this because we just love that life is so freaking hilarious.
It really is.
About it.
Everything is. I laugh all the time.
Every part of the human anatomy, every part of the human experience, everything that goes on is in some way hilarious. This is all a big cosmic joke.
All of it is probably a big cosmic mistake, accident. Doesn't mean there isn't value. That doesn't mean there isn't value beyond this life, and I believe there is. But for now, let's just make fun of shit. You know, I'm perfectly happy with the rest of my life being this.
Yeah.
Perfectly happy with that. It's probably what I want, but it is, and that's why. Do you ever have? I don't know exactly what your writing process is, maybe. Do you ever have a hard time generating ideas? Because I don't at all. I can get the idea. It's finishing the joke that's very hard for me.
I'm the same way.
Yeah.
Premises all day.
Oh, all day.
Yeah.
Hundreds that I have never used.
That's why my phone is full of. I use Google Keep to track my.
Sure.
To keep all my jokes.
Sure.
It's mostly premises.
Yep.
But then I'll like scroll through and be like, I wonder if any of these are going to spark anything today, and I'll just throw tags in once in a while.
Yeah.
But now that it's like once it's in my phone, like whatever that person is pushing around there, I think that's like a floor polisher.
Yeah.
Like if I put a floor polisher in my phone, whenever I think about that lady with the floor polisher,
Right.
something might come to mind.
Yeah. You
Nothing's
never
coming to
know.
mind right now.
It's sometimes I like to write the concept down and not a lot else, because then when I come back to it, it's like a brand new prompt.
Yeah.
And then I start writing things about it that are funny. It's interesting too. Amanda has encouraged me to start making more fun of her on stage, and I've done it. I have a new joke, and we talked about this. I watched Joe List get into this the other night. He made a joke about running on a track versus a woman who maybe wasn't in the best shape.
Great.
And God bless her. And he wasn't making fun of the woman.
It's a very good example of being totally in the wrong by accident.
And that's what and he's making fun of himself, right? Being in the wrong. So I tried something a few weeks ago, and I think the idea is funny. But Amanda told me, she's like, the women in the audience will get mad and will not laugh. And the joke was that it was because I saw a guy one time congratulate a woman for being pregnant, and she wasn't pregnant. And so we certainly would not make fun of that woman, but I would make fun of how terrible that would feel.
Yeah.
I kind of tried something like that, and they didn't like it, but that's okay. But I do one about this is the one that people didn't like that I was surprised at. So I make fun of Amanda that the only way I know she's getting older, because she doesn't age otherwise, the only way I know she's getting older is because she can't sneak up on me anymore because her bones crack all the time, as that's the ghost of old crackety bones. And I said that she sounds like the North Pole melting and when she comes down the stairs. And surprisingly, people are like, there was a group of older women who thought it was funny, and I was like, we got any crackety bones at this table? They're like, actually, yeah. So that was fun. But it is interesting, just the modern audience. I think the idea that has been beaten to death of you can't talk about anything anymore, that's not true. You just have to be creative about it and not use your platform to attack, which I don't think any of us do. But it is interesting to I've always been fascinated by the psychology of the modern audience, to look out, why is this killing? Why is that not killing? Why can somebody like one of our peers who I admire greatly do that joke, but if I did it, they would hate me for it? What's your take on kind of the modern audience?
I think there's a lot of things at play, and this probably changes from audience to audience, because sometimes you'll have, let's use the extreme example of, and I think I just discussed this with Drew Harmon, like the corporate show, where if you tell a joke that kills in other rooms, suddenly you're in a room full of people that have to look next to them and see if it's okay to laugh at this.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of that psychology at almost every show you go to.
Yeah.
Where there's people on dates that are trying to impress the person that they're with.
Right.
There's people who are there with their friends who may not know their true sense of humor.
Right.
And we're all tight in our own way about certain things like that. And I experienced this at the Joe List show, when I kept listening to this woman in the row in front of me.
Yeah, and she was next to us.
She was next to you.
Yeah.
Instead of laughing, it was very often a groan or a oh.
Yeah, I heard her.
To me that's the sound you use to mask what you're really feeling.
Yeah.
She wanted to laugh at that joke, but didn't feel like her laugh was appropriate for some reason.
Isn't
because
that
of the
weird?
People she was with.
Yeah.
So instead, she felt like, oh no, and
which is what I often say in the bedroom.
She obviously recognized the joke.
Yeah.
She reacted at the right time.
Yeah.
So
her comic timing was impeccable.
She was on it.
Yeah.
But verbalizing "oh no" is not a natural response. She made that choice. Whereas a laugh comes from within, It's
just it's spontaneous.
It's like tickling your brain.
Yeah, you don't try to, you just laugh.
Some of us try to stifle that.
Yeah, it's an involuntary. If
I was to tickle you, you'd be like, "Ah,
yeah, exactly."
Give you the satisfaction.
Ah, you rascal! Yeah,
don't tickle me, by the way.
I find it interesting when, one of our peers, if he's a black African American comic, and he'll make fun of his experiences in relationship to white people, not in a mean way, but it's like oh, we can all, and you look at the white people in the audience, and they're almost like, oh, sometimes I can't laugh at that, but not understanding that the fact that he's doing the joke is your green light to laugh at it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if sometimes we've all just gotten so uptight about impressions that we're looking around afraid that somebody will think that we're a bad person for laughing at something that person said. And maybe I'm overanalyzing, but I think that is weird.
I have a joke that I do, which is it's my only racial joke that I do in my entire set. which is what you get when you cross watermelon with collard greens,
Right.
a Nobel Prize in agriculture, which isn't even a joke. It's just
Right. Right.
it's dissecting the white guilt that goes along with allowing, like, everybody tightens up.
Right.
And it's very often that the black people in the audience are the ones that are laughing at them.
Well, that's a
at that
great joke.
And the white people are the ones that are looking at the black people asking if it's okay.
That's a great joke. The one that I do that got weird recently. It's just a easy pop culture joke, but it was that the Kardashian sisters are producing, I think I told you this one, a line of female wellness gummies that women insert directly into the vagina. It only comes in one flavor, black guy. And it usually, people really love it. And if there happens to be a black gentleman in the audience, I'll look at him and I'll say, "My apologies, sir," or "My compliments." And that usually gets a big laugh too. The last time I did that, it was like the older, and I don't like to like look at, oh, there's white people, but I don't care. But the older people seem like a little like that's funny, but are we laughing? And the younger people are like, yeah, the Kardashians. It's not a judgment on anything. It's just their history is that that's what they do. That's great. Good for them. But that's interesting. But yeah,
there is an interesting language that exists within the comedy club.
Yeah.
And part of that is a mutual understanding that everybody in the room has flaws. We're all inherently broken in some way.
Yes.
And we all understand that, and we all know that there's something worth chuckling about all of us.
I would hope so.
And you don't often see that. I think I specifically mentioned the comedy clubs in particular because it's different in there than it would be at necessarily a bar show or a show where there's people that weren't there for the comedy necessarily, and now for some reason somebody on stage is making fun of them. So
right.
So I try to have understanding about what people are sensitive to, but there is a contract within that we all agree to. It's unwritten and it's unspoken. When you walk into a comedy club, I'm not talking about like sitting in the front row and now they're making fun of the way you look.
Right.
I'm talking about, generally speaking, we're all in there because we all understand that the human condition is a weird thing. And we all have these assumptions about each other.
I like how you said that it's a contract. I like that's interesting because I think that is when you upon signing up for that. We talked about this before. Well, I do a lot of jokes about growing up, my mother being Mexican, and everything in my childhood, everything was Mexican. But then I do these jokes about like being Mexican, and it's weird because sometimes it can kind of tell when people are laughing like, "Oh, you're making fun of the stereotype, not of the people." And there's other times you're like, "Oh, that laugh felt different." You know what I mean? I make some joke about not making a run for the border because we're all slow, and people are like, it's such a difference in the laugh. You're like, "Oh, you think it's funny, but not for the reason that I do."
Yeah. Well, that's why you often hear comedians say, "Oh, you're all laughing for the wrong reasons." Right. On that joke.
Exactly.
Have to figure out how to say
like
that.
But then even then, I don't really care. There was one time I was doing a show. It was a couple years ago. I started out the show by saying it was in a place, not a very nice place. And I said, "So my mother's family's from Mexico." Somebody yells out, "You should go back there." I'm like, fuck, man. You can hate me, but let me get through the punchline first, you dick. Jesus Christ.
That's a pretty good punchline.
I know. He did the work for me.
That's impeccable timing.
Yeah. Go back there. But what was cool is the other people were like yelled at him, but then by that time like we had kind of lost the vibe. But that was the only time that I've ever had somebody flat out saying, "Oh, there was a guy." I'm like, "I'm Mexican. Anybody else?" One guy's like, "I don't like Mexicans." Like, that's not what I asked you, fucker. Fucking asshole. So wear your racism on your sleeve.
Johnny Mockney is sitting right over there. I'm going to bring this up while he's within earshot.
Yeah.
Because we were both at the roast battle last night, in which Johnny was victorious.
Oh, he's great.
And both of us,
very impressive,
on the drive over, expressed similar feelings about going to roast battles.
About what?
About going to roast battles.
Yes.
Because I don't know, roasting in general makes me nervous, and it's not because last night everybody was on their game. It was a fantastic event.
It was so good.
what makes me nervous about it are the people who don't understand the rules of engagement when it comes to roasting.
Yeah.
Because what is a roast? A roast is where we're making fun of each other at its heart. That's what we're doing.
You know what was
something I'm really sensitive to growing up as a kid who was bullied.
I don't love
beyond belief.
You and I were sitting there. We walked in. We're there to root for some great people, but yeah, I don't think it's anything I would ever excel at. And I agree with what you're saying. I'm always just like you said. What are the lines?
Right. And the nervousness that I always feel is everybody aware of each other's soft tissue?
Right.
What are the things that we're allowed to make fun of each other about? And frankly, the part that made me the most nervous last night is everybody didn't know each other. So
right. So you're basing it on appearance.
Right. Oh,
which is, of that. Yeah. Yeah, I think everybody handled it really well. I think that's, a lot of people were going at Johnny and his his ethnic background and his handsome looks and all that. And that's tough, man, because that's tough to sit up there and listen to that and to keep telling yourself, oh, it's just a joke. I can't speak for him, but that seems like a lot.
It is a lot.
To deal with in front of a bunch of people in an impromptu environment.
And it is a part of comedy.
It is a part of comedy. And he handled it like a champ. And so did everybody else.
I thought it was a great event.
That's just a lot.
It was a lot. But, I think both of us walked in there with the same hesitation.
Anxiety
about it.
Yeah,
and we both walked out feeling pretty good about how everybody...
What I'm always afraid is going to happen at one of those, and, we're all pros, so hopefully it doesn't. I'm always afraid that somebody's going to hit something where the other person is just like, okay, and you can just see the hurt on them. I never want to see that.
Well, one of the very first conversations I had with you, long conversations, was when I had been signed up to do a roast battle myself.
Oh, I remember that.
I've never taken part in one.
I remember that.
I was signed up to do one, and the group chat surrounding this roast battle, one of the participants who I don't remember, don't know his name, one of the comments was, I can't wait for this roast battle. I won't be satisfied unless somebody goes home and kills himself, which obviously said in jest.
Yeah.
Wasn't meant with any true hurtful feelings,
but
with my own personal background.
Yeah.
It was a little too close to home at that time in my life, and I used that opportunity to withdraw.
Well, there you go.
And it was my choice. I didn't need to throw anybody under the bus.
No.
I didn't necessarily tell anybody else why.
Right. Well, that's sort of your trigger.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay. I really do. I think that's a weird thing to say in a message thread. I mean, didn't Johnny make that joke to Nick during the thing? But see, that's funny.
I don't remember.
He said nobody will remember you once you kill yourself. Oh, yeah. But but see, that's funny. It's in the moment.
Well, it was in the context of Nick's joke. So.
Right, and that was a knockdown drag out.
I really love that battle.
That was great.
That was the finals.
That was
That was the finals. Oh, and I think Drew would agree with us.
I agree. Yeah, he would. But to put that in a message thread, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
And you did the right way. You're like, I'm good. I'm just gonna walk away.
I specifically asked if I could talk to you on the phone about it.
Yeah, we talked
before I did. Before I sent anything, because usually, in the moment, if I'm feeling a little amped up, I try to step away from the phone. I'll put the phone down and
try
walk
not to
away.
knee jerk.
But then I reached out to you and I was asked if I could call and talk about it.
I appreciated
we ended
it.
up having a really nice conversation.
Yeah, we did. It was great.
Yeah,
whatever you're comfortable with, man. I mean, if that was something that was over a line for you.
I know you have a full day of activities.
I do,
ahead of you, and we've already been going about an hour here.
Yeah.
But I do.
Thank you.
I'm sure the people that have been watching this and have been enjoying this want to know more about how they can find you and follow what you're doing.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. So I have these.
I'll add links and everything to the show notes.
So we have these new, way too big business cards that nobody can fit in their pocket, aren't they?
Of The Office. Do you remember? Are you a fan of The Office when everybody got business cards that were way too big?
No, I did. Not as much, but
they didn't fit in your wallet.
I mean, that's just a fun thing because then people have to make an effort to enjoy what I provide.
Yeah.
So we are Doomsday Shelter Comedy for Mental Health. We are based in Oxford, Michigan, Wildcats, USA. You can follow us anywhere. I just updated our Instagram so that it's now a chronological history of everywhere we've been.
I was wondering why you were posting that.
I know. I think a lot of people were. I didn't mean to. And Duke was like, fuck, I'm on a show this week? I'm like, no, that was last
It
year.
was a lot of old stuff.
I know.
I'm sure a lot of people were like, what the fuck is happening?
I know Camilla was like, you're opening for Joe List? I'm like, no, I did 2 years ago. But I know. So it's a chronological history. It's not everything on there, but we've done pretty well. And you can follow us on Doomsday Shelter Comedy and all your major social media outlets. And we have a show, it's the 25th, Sunday, February 25th.
Yeah.
This gentleman will be on along with my dear friend Kate Brindle, with our headliner Matt McClowry, who we all know and love.
I just met him for the first time last weekend.
What a champ.
Yeah, I know.
There's only one. There is only one Matt McClowry. So we would love for you to come out and see us. I'll be hosting that night, trying out some new stuff. Oxford's beautiful, and the people are beautiful, and having this guy and my friends, and that would be great. So thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
I appreciate it. Thank you for making the time.
We end every episode in the same way. You can say it however you'd like, but it's the name of the show. I'm glad you're here, Jason.
I'm glad you're here, Greg. That's how I'll say it. Thanks, brother. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. I love you.